to set up our fire floats. As you can see here, we got two different size fire floats. So we've got a smaller one and a larger one. And I've got both of them laid out here, and I'm going to cover the rigs from top to bottom because there's two primary ways you can fish one of these little fire floats for trout. And the reason we have two different sizes is because there are situations where you're fishing a smaller stream and you want to use less weight, shorter leader. You can use the smaller float. And there may be situations where you want some more weight and you want to use the larger fire float, or even in a lake, which I can cover that too. So if we start at the bottom end of our rig here, it starts with our fire hook. So we have a fire hook tied on, and that can be used with salmon eggs, dough bait, some of our artificials like our fire minnows, but it's going to a fluorocarbon leader, and that's something that's super important for the rig underneath the fire float. This is 4-pound test. But up here near the float, you'll see I've got a swivel, and that swivel is what allows me to tie to my main line. So main line is what's coming off of your fishing reel, and you have weights on your main line to help load the fire float. As you can see with both of them, they both have weights. Now the simplest way to rig a fire float is the fixed method. So on our fire float, you'll see there's this black stem, and that actually pulls out of the fire float. So if you look, you can see there's a hole straight through the fire float. And on the side of the fire float, if you look closely, one of the sides will have a slit in it for your line to slide through. So on the rig right here, I'm going to do the same thing. Take this off. You'll see without the fire float on, this is that same thing I just showed you. So it's my leader, my swivel, my weights, but no fire float on it. And that main line that's coming off of your fishing reel goes through the slot in the float. So you put the main line through that slot in the float, and then you want to make sure the main line is seated on the back side of the fire float away from the slot. And all you have to do is just push this into the fire float and it pegs it. That's what we call pegging a float. So it pins the line in between the peg and the styrofoam of the fire float onto your line. And the peg is tapered, so the further you push it in, the harder it will stick to your line. And this is also what determines your depth on the fixed fire float method. So if I leave it right there, I'm only setting this deep. And if I want to go deeper, all I have to do is slide the fire float up the line, and it stays pegged right there because of the pressure of that peg, and I'm set deeper. Now, if you want to make things a little bit more advanced, or if you're fishing a lake where you're fishing much deeper water, it can be hard sometimes to have a pegged float way up your line, because then you're dealing with all this line in between, and it can be kind of tough to cast. So if you're fishing deeper water, the reason we have a slip float method is for that, because like any slip bobber, it's rigged with a knot and a bead, and the knot is what's pegged on your line. So the knot is what is tied onto your line, and it's fixed on the line. And then the fire float can freely slide up and down the line, but will be stopped by that knot to determine your depth. Now the reason that this works with the fire float as well is because on that black stem I was showing you with the fire float, instead of putting your line through the fire float and pegging it like the last rig, you just keep the stem in the fire float and you rig it straight through. You'll see there's a hole in the stem straight down it, and your line goes through that stem. So if you look here on this rig, you'll see the fire float, there's no line inside the fire float like the last one, but it's the stem. We have the stem of the fire float through the line, and like I said, that's what stops the float from going up, that knot. So then when the line is through there, all you have to do is you put your fire float on, but because the line is through the stem, it doesn't peg it to the line. It just holds the float on the line like that, but it's imperative that you use a knot and a bead to stop it. But what's nice about this is, let's say you're setting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet deep. You slide this knot to that depth if you're fishing a lake. But look at this, your float isn't sliding with it. It still stays down to the lower part of the rig. When you cast in the water and your weights sink, your float will continue to slide as your bait sinks to depth, but will be stopped by that knot and bead. And that's how you can set deep with a fire float as well. So this is a little bit more complex for deep water. Fire floats being used on a lake are super effective, definitely not as common as our fixed float method. The fixed float method does not involve a knot or a bead. It's much more simple. Pretty much the only rig you need for fishing small streams, pegging it on the line just like that. Super easy, super effective, and that's quickly how to rig a fire float. So I was covering the difference between the small and the large float. This is our combo pack, so you'll see there's 2 smaller ones up top, and then there's 2 bigger ones down on the bottom. You also saw that as I was covering the rigs. So I had the larger float with the slip and the smaller float with the pegged. They both can be fished either way. So they both can be pegged, they both can be rigged as slip. But when you're looking to purchase these, there is 2 different options available. So this is the combo pack with both sizes. And if you don't think that bigger float is for you, we also have one with 4 small ones in it. It's just a small pack with 4 small ones.
Pautzke products are available at sporting goods stores near you. If you can't find the specific color, size that you want, make sure to go to Pautzke.com. And as a thank you for watching Pautzke Outdoors, we're going to show you a coupon code to be used for 10% off your next order.